Alright, so I think this is going to be a little bit of a follow-up to the rounding hammer build. When I hung it, I really was not happy with that wedge. I said it a number of times in there, but I wanted to get on to do some other projects, so I kind of just left it as it was. Now that that other project, the kindling box that I wanted to use this hammer for is done, I think I'm going to pull this center wedge and that metal wedge and see if I can use some of this this poplar that I have. So I think this is poplar. Something that's going to compress a little bit better, and I can cut it in a wider center wedge to kind of fill that gap. I'm going to kind of cut it in like an hourglass shape, and hopefully it compresses better and fills those ends. Hopefully it'll kind of fill those, my fat fingers all the way, kind of fill these ends here and here better. So I'll kind of keep it, hourglass shaped. Hopefully it'll kind of compress and move around that hickory in there. And then when I hung this, I knew I was not going to be happy with it, and I was going to come back to it at a later point. But I wanted to get it hung enough to use just because I was being impatient. And I know I can do better. I think it was James Bond that commented that, that he's seen some of the other hangs and that he knows that I can do better, or thinks that I can do better. I agree. I'm not. This is definitely not one that I'm proud of, but it did hold tight. It did work for now to get that little bit of work done on that, the handles for that kindling box. But now that I've got a little bit more time in the shop to work on this, I'm planning on kind of addressing this. And when I hung it, I knew I was going to come back to it after I got that black locust wedge in there and wasn't happy with it. Because traditionally, when you throw a metal wedge in to fill a gap, you throw it in a cross grain like that. I threw this in parallel with the wooden wedge just so I can actually get in there, pry it out easier. I wasn't going to actually damage or separate any of the wood. So when I hung this, I knew I was going to come back and fix this because I wasn't happy with it. So now we got a little bit of time. Let's work on it. So one of the other things I do want to do is just measure how wide of a gap I really want at the center prior to pulling this, just so I can get an idea of how thick to make the replacement wedge. So it looks like with it, the way it's compressed right here, it's pretty consistently about 1/4 of an inch. So the center part of of course it stopped focusing. So the center part of my wedge here, I'm going to have the replacement wedge. I'm going to have be about 1/4 of an inch. Whereas you can see this black locust one was probably 2/3 to 1/2 of that width that it needed to be. And black locust, while it's hard, it's really hard. So I like it for wedges for that reason. It also doesn't compress to fill gaps very well. And when you have such a odd shape, not odd shaped, but when you've got irregular or unsymmetrical eye, kind of like this, where you're trying to fill gaps at the end while get compression in the center, a hardwood wedge like black locust is probably not the best choice for it. I probably would have been better off using like the sugar maple, like I like to use, or silver maple, or like I said, I'm going to go with the replacement one. I'm going to do I believe it's poplar. That's a hunk from a pallet, but it looks like poplar to me. And it's soft. I can actually dent it pretty easily with my fingernail, so it should be soft enough, get good compression. The grain's running in the right direction for the way I like cutting them, so we'll make a replacement out of that. But first things first, get these old ones out that aren't doing what they need to do. No, I guess they are doing what they need to do. I just don't like the looks of them. All right, handle's free. I bring her over to the normal part of the bench so you can see how bad it is. We'll see. All right, so as far as the compression we had inside the head, it was really good. Did not get full depth on that wedge, which is not surprising. It stopped out right where that eye really tapered. So should have a little bit more room, a little bit of sanding to drop it a little further on that shoulder. We'll widen up that center part of that kerf a bit. And when we cut that new wedge, we'll make it nice and fat so that top part really grabs. And I'm not surprised that it was so tight in that eye that where the handle really, or the tongue of it, the handle compressed, it pinched at that point, and there was no way that wedge was fitting further down in. So didn't get full depth on the wedge on the initial one. So like you saw the abuse and how hard it was to get that out. I don't think it was going anywhere, but it did not look pretty. So round 2. Alright, so my goal with this poplar wedge is to have the top of it fit that, so that way this kind of fills those spots of the tongue, and the bottom be fairly narrow. So I'm going to go in here with some round files, shape this top part up, and hopefully kind of groove out where this will hopefully compress around that hickory. So I think I've got things where I want them now. I'm hoping this is going to compress significantly more than the black locust. Got the side of my head marked with some soapstone. This fits in nicely. You can see that should be about the gap that we have left on each side, plus a little bit of room for compression. Still got meat on the wedge on the top here. Got the handle fitted up. Let's see, it still fit from before, so it didn't take a ton. But I'm also thinking, I don't know, I wasn't quite crazy about the color of this, so maybe I'll do a darker char on it. Because I already got this section here where I need to blend it in, so maybe I'll try that. Alright, try not to burn myself here. I don't usually char handles, but I don't know. I just recently watched a video where a guy did like a completely dark black char on a axe handle. I thought it looked cool. I don't know. Like I said, I wasn't crazy about this, kind of the color that this ebonizing came out. It really didn't get too dark, so I'll go with this. All right, I like how that finish came out. Super dark. Yeah, I like it at least more than the whatever that ebonizing ones. I like it on some of the hickory. For some reason, this piece just didn't turn as dark or the kind of shade I wanted. I don't know if it's because of the ebonizing solution. It's just vinegar and steel wool. Ebonizing solution sounds fancy, but that's what it is, I guess. I don't know if it sat too long, and that's kind of what caused it to kind of lose its potency. But yeah, so all right, get on with it. Hang this, drive the wedge, throw some oil on it, and then check if we got good compression or not. Happy with that. Happy with, you know, that seat at the bottom there. Just a tiny little bit of curling there, which I'm fine with. All right, now that we've got it seated, don't really need that soapstone A on there anymore. So this is the gap prior to driving in, and that tongue closed up really tight, so probably going to have to pry it open a little bit to try to get that wedge started. Got just the tip of that or corner of that wedge in. Start driving it. There's the attack hammer of that. First, it started like it wanted to back out a little bit. That is just because it's so wide of a wedge. So I'm going to get this set up on the floor and then get a heavy hammer. We're going to go at this again. I did get it started though, so it's at least grabbing. Hopefully you guys can see what's going on here. I'm going to do my best to drive this wedge and not hit my hand in the process. It looks like the shape of the poplar wedge is working well so far. Kind of take up those gaps, but we'll see. Alright, see it did split. I'm not worried about that. I just want good compression. I'm going to keep beating this until it, maybe you can't see the guy in the split. See it split. I'm not too worried about that. It looks like we're getting good compression, so I'm going to keep driving this, try to get as best compression as we can, seat that wedge just a little bit deeper, and then we'll trim it flush. That looks good to me. We'll come back, clean it up, and get some oil on it. The initial cut looks pretty good. All right, we're gonna clean it up and see how it really looks. All right, I'm much happier with how that that hang came out, that compression. Fills it from face to face really nicely, and you know, sidewall of the eye really nicely. That kind of hourglass shaped wedge seemed to work well. That poplar compressed, and I think really that poplar compressing is probably the biggest key to it, because there was just so much irregularity in it wasn't just a flat section that needed to go wider, right? It was that hourglass shape that needed to kind of compress and form. I think that was really the poplar or softer wood wedge is really what was needed there. It's not always needed, but sometimes it is. Yeah, I like that dark char on it. Get the bench cleaned off, and we'll throw some oil on this. Alright, so like I said, I like how the fit came out. The hang looks nice and tight, and I like the darker handle too. Like, don't get me wrong, if there's an option to keep a vintage handle, I'll absolutely keep that, but with a replacement, I don't know, this is kind of cool looking for a hammer. I don't know if I'd do it on a whole axe, maybe it's the right axe, but burnishing it after left it super smooth. I am curious how much oil this finish is going to take up, because I know that kind of charred finish is supposed to be pretty, kind of like locks in the pores too, so we'll see. I'm just using some standard, I'm showing like it says it on it, but just some standard boiled linseed oil, my usual sriracha bottle. It's cool that it gets super dark when oiled, so it's kind of neat. It's cool. When you oil it, you can kind of see some of those brown hues kind of showing through a little more. This handle was previously treated too, obviously the last time I did the video, but it doesn't seem like it's soaking up too much, so probably the combination of it previously having been oiled and with it now being charred, it's really not taking on too much. Should soak up that eye, let that wood swell and compress even more. Again, I like how that poplar, that softer poplar, really conformed to fit the eye. I don't like that it's not as hard, because then maybe you can't get as good compression, but I don't know. It seems like it's filling it up nicely to really fill those weird kind of gaps from where that other previous wedge was, and kind of where I nicked the inside of that tongue with the drill bit. So yeah, definitely something for Poplar, being one of the most popular, if not the most popular, wedge materials. I don't know if I'd use it every time, but sure did help this time. So some rounding hammer redemption. Let me know what you guys think of the handle. Would you have kept it the original, just plain hickory? Would you have left it kind of that ebonized color, which I did like, but I don't know, it was just kind of off from what I was hoping? Or would you go ahead and kind of char it like I did here? Out of the three options, for that kind of blonde hickory, this is my favorite option so far. So again, I think it all kind of depends on the aesthetic you're going for the hammer, or handle, whatever, if it's for an axe head. So yeah, let me know what you guys would have done. I can't imagine any of you guys would have picked the previous hang over this one, but if you would, let me know that too. I think this one came out a lot better, so I'm happy with that. Not embarrassed to have that one hanging on the rack now. Like I said, right after I did that first one, I wanted to use it in that project. I knew I wanted to do that that kindling box. I rushed it. Shouldn't have. But, whatever. Give me another excuse to work on the handle, and now I'm 100% happy with how the project came out. But appreciate you guys watching, and stay tuned for the next one.